wheat looks like. Does that look like wheat to you? Does that look like barley to you? This is a plant which grows in northwestern Europe. Again, it's something which can be used quite successfully for animal fodder, and therefore it was used in that part of the world. And some people were convinced that this was kusemeth, because the natural inclination of people is to try, especially when scientific knowledge wasn't widespread and very well based, the natural inclination of any person is to take the words in the Mishnah, the species of grain mentioned in the Mishnah, and try and relate it to the things he sees around him. And Jews, although Rashi doesn't say this, I'm not saying Rashi does, but many Jews, many Pusakim also thought that the grechka, in other words the buckwheat, is kusemeth, but it has nothing to do with wheat or barley. So you see that the environment can lead to such misunderstandings. The same, I think, happened with regards to rye and oats. Regarding your question, do I eat rye and oats on Pesach? My answer is that even though I believe that Shibolet Shu'al is not oats, but a form of barley, as mentioned in the Braitha, and even though I believe that Shifon is a form of barley and not rye, which is a different grain altogether, nevertheless, because Rashi was of that view, I will not eat oats or rye on Pesach myself. But whether that should be stated as a psak halacha for all people, that's another question.
Let's say, for example, the issue of Chadash and Yashin.
Mm-hmm.
Would you not be machmir on? I imagine your position is to stay away from known Chadash.
Absolutely. Much more than most people, yes. In other words,
Right.
I don't accept the usual terutzim.
Would you not be so machmir on rye and oats in that regard?
Again, because of Rashi's identification, I would, as a chumrah, I would stay with Rashi's perush as a chumrah, but I don't really believe that's the halacha actually applies.
Even with Chadash and Yashin, because there are a lot of other factors that one could be makel on when it comes to a safek.
You're right. You could claim, you could come up with certain safekot. That's true, but in general, I'm machmir regarding hadash.
Even for oats.
Yes.
All right. If I can ask a few questions about, so Machon Shilo is a beit din. What do you have a yeshiva? Do you have what can you tell me about Machon Shilo and about its the people that follow it? How many followers? How many?
Well, I can begin with the last question because it's the easiest to answer. How many followers does Machon Shilo have? Do I have? I really don't know. I have no way of knowing that. I know that I receive emails from all kinds of people I've never heard of or met, both from here and overseas, who ask questions, halachic questions, and write to me and say how much they enjoy the website or the audio shiurim, what have you. But I have no way of gauging, of knowing this. I do believe that the message of Machon Shilo is getting an increasingly wide audience. Little less than a year ago, we came out with the Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael Birkat HaMazon, which is over here, if you want to have a look at it. For the camera, if you want to see.
Yeah, if you can hold it up.
I can hold it up by all means. We have a Sidur Nusach Eretz Yisrael. Sidur Nusach Eretz Yisrael. We have a minyan here regularly where we daven according to this Nusach. And I think the idea that Torah Judaism in Eretz Yisrael today should not simply be the Judaism of Galuth, whether it's the Galuth of Minsk, Dvinsk, and Pinsk, or the Judaism of Sana'a and Marrakesh or Cairo, makes no difference. I believe that more and more people are beginning to understand and appreciate that the Torah of Eretz Yisrael today should not simply be the same Galut Judaism transposed to Eretz Yisrael, and that our purpose should be to maintain indefinitely what I call Galut mode Judaism. What our aim should be, and this is, I believe, the will of Hashem and the thrust of the entire Torah, is that the Jewish people should return to Eretz Yisrael. They are required to return to Eretz Yisrael, both as a klal and as pratim, as individuals. And we are commanded by the Torah, and it has always been the aspiration of the Jewish people, as expressed in our tefillot 3 times a day for thousands of years. It has always been our aspiration to return to Eretz Yisrael and reconstitute an independent, sovereign Jewish nation in Eretz Yisrael, and in which the Torah is the essential framework and underpinning of that Jewish society in Eretz Yisrael. A person who thinks about these things seriously, I believe, will reach the conclusion that simply taking the way Judaism was lived and understood and studied and learned and practiced in Hungary or in Poland or in Morocco or Teman, we'll see that this cannot be the way forward, and it doesn't lead us anywhere. It simply leads us into a dead end, where we have an indefinite fracturing of the Jewish people along ethnic lines, where the Jewish people therefore cannot have any united purpose or aspiration, and certainly cannot, in simple terms, get their act together. Only when the Jewish people are united around a clearly defined Torah-based aspiration and ideology and national will the Jewish people get their act together.
Rabbi Bar-Hayim's Rabbi at Merkaz Rav, I understand that's the yeshiva, one of the yeshivas I mentioned that the Rav led.
That's correct.
What has been their reaction per se to this idea of Torah Eretz Yisrael in terms of following the methodologies of the Rishonim as opposed to the Galut Judaism of the Shulchan Aruch, the Bavli? What has been their reaction? Have they backed you? Have they not backed you? Are they parv?
Let me answer that question with the following true story. Just yesterday, I was speaking to a certain person, a Rav, Tamid Chachamim, who was the Rav of a certain yeshuv in Israel for over 20 years. He's older than myself, so he learned also in Merkaz Rav, and he remembers Merkaz Rav as it once was, even before I remember it. And he said to me in his own words yesterday, Merkaz Rav today is like any Haredi yeshiva, is just wear different. Most of them wear a different kippah. That's all. And I would agree with that assessment. I would even go further. I would say it's not only today. That's also essentially an accurate description of Merkaz Rav, as I recall it also. In other words, what I'm saying to you is this. The yeshiva that was originally established by Rav Kook in Tafresh Pei Dalet, 1924, was supposed to be a different kind of yeshiva. It was supposed to achieve many things. Unfortunately, it has not achieved those things. It has completely failed. The reason for that failure, to a very large extent, in my opinion, in my considered opinion, based on my experience and my personal acquaintance with Rav Tzvi Kook Zal, the son of Rav Kook, I think that the blame is to be placed at his doorstep. I think his approach was essentially a Haredi approach, but with certain additions. In other words, you take the same cake, but you add a few different add a few cherries on top. You say Hallel on your Matzmaut, and you talk about Eretz Yisrael, and you learn the Kuzari, of course only very selected chapters or pages thereof, or you learn the Maharal, but again only very particular chapters that happen to support the party line. But